do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the Bible Big Mouth or Unapologetic Raw. The objective of this program is to allow you, the caller, and our guests to share their individual thoughts, views, and opinions. Hey, our job is to moderate.
All right. It's another edition of the Bible Big Mouth Show. Fantastic topic for you. Let's turn me down a little bit. My headset. Okay, we good? Right about now, everybody, let's start to share. Send those links out. Send those comments out. Let's get everybody in the room. Let's get everybody involved. Boom, there it is. Absolutely excited about this show. Excited about this one. Let me just pull up. Okay. Now, as I always say, this is a call-in show, meaning that you could call in with your questions, comments, statements. And I'm sure our guest today will definitely oblige. And to the best of my ability, I will do exactly that. The topic of today, British Israelism. British Israelism and European culture going back prior to Christianity. Sometimes we tend to sit on our own bag of knowledge. Sometimes we tend to read in specific areas and study in specific areas. And that gives us a certain amount of information, which is good. Read all things, study all things. Sometimes the perspectives of others, or different than yours, needs to be heard. Sometimes you just got to be quiet and listen up, because the truth comes in various forms. Confirmation of things that you may know, things that you may have thought about. Confirmation of things that you think you know but are incorrect with. Sometimes just lending an ear to another story can help you out with your own story. We have an interesting guest, very interesting guest, and I got some questions, loads of questions, and matter of fact, I just kind of want to listen. I want to hear this perspective, because I think that there's some things that I want to hear, and I'm hoping that you want to hear. On tonight's show, which is British Israelism and European culture prior to Christianity, we have Dave, the Southern Nordic. Dave, welcome to the Bible Big Mouth Show. How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me on here. I truly appreciate it. Very excited, and I'm glad you found me on here.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was actually one of the schedulers kind of said, "Hey, check this out," because we talk amongst each other around here, and I'm interested in specific topics, and I said, "Check this out," and I checked it, and I said, get a hold of this guy. Get a hold of this guy. I need. Yeah.
To be here.
So Dave, let's start off how I always start off. Let's assume and pretend that everybody listening, whether live or to come later, knows nothing about you, knows nothing about me, knows nothing about the topics that we want to talk about today, and let's kind of lay it down slow. I'm gonna kind of lead you through it, but I'm here with a pen and a pad to hear what you got to say. So let's start off with Dave. Give us an introductory. Who are you? Where are you? Tell us something about, Dave, the Southern Nordic.
Um, well, my name's Dave, of course, and I'm 33 years old. I was raised in the northeast corner of Tennessee in an extremely rural area, part of Appalachia. It's a beautiful place, but it's a pretty poor place also. And yeah, I started making videos on YouTube. I think it was in November of 2019, and I've slowly grown my channel. But yeah, I'm interested in a lot of different things, history, um, all parts of history. Usually, from a young age, I was always interested in history, um, namely ancient history up until about the year 1100. And then my interest picks back up greatly when we enter the 20th century. So there's more things I need to learn about, say, the Middle Ages, the Age of Exploration and stuff. Um, I like to do a lot of fishing, hunting. I like to get outdoors. I was raised on a farm basically, so I've always enjoyed planning. I've always enjoyed being outside. Anything to get me outdoors, and I'm happy and content with it.
Okay. And the Southern Nordic, how'd you come across that name?
Well, it's kind of an oxymoron, I thought. Southern and Nordic. Well, of course, I live here in the southern United States. I chose Nordic because when I was young, I used to ask my dad, like, what we are, who we are, and such. And, I was interested in the different racial phenotypes that all races on this planet have. And my dad always said we were Nordic. Means we are, blonde to blondish brown headed. We all have blue eyes, usually tall in stature. And in fact, our ancestors, my dad's side of the family, going back the paternal line, they originally came from Denmark. They arrived here in the United States back in the 1840s. But most of my family has largely English roots, and there's a little bit of French in there as well. So yeah, I just decided on Southern Nordic. It just came to me one day, and that's what I named. That's what was my first Twitter handle. And then a couple of months later, I started making videos, and I decided on Southern Nordic.
Okay, all right. And okay, so the Nordic side of things is your father. What about your mother's side of things? What's the background there?
Largely English. They're largely English. I think there might be a little bit of Scottish in there as well. That's one thing I've sadly noticed. It seems like a lot of people in America, they don't, and I mean it was the same for me. When I started doing this, I learned many more things. I was able to trace my lineage back 2 to 3 more generations across the board. And I think it seems like when people came to America, in a sad sense, they kind of lost over the generations. They kind of forgot who they were. They forgot where they came from. They don't know a lot of the lineage. That's one thing I admire about like the Bible, the Old Testament, is like how and there's so many books in the Old Testament where it's just lineage. It's just David begat Solomon, and they can trace it back so far. And that's one thing, sadly, I've noticed amongst Americans is that we can't do that anymore. And it's a shame.
Now, we're going to get there because I want to kind of talk about that. Let's jump because we went biblical a bit there. Let's jump into British Israelism. Let's get that out of the way. We'll put that on the barbecue, roast it, serve it, and we'll get it out. Let's explain, what is British Israelism? What is it? Oh, Okay, so we have a little bit of difficulty there. Okay, so Dave, let's pause a moment. We had a little bit of difficulty there. That's cool. It's what it is. It's systems. Every now and then we have to go through such a thing. So let's pause it for a moment. We're rebooting stuff there? Yeah. Okay. So if you're joining in right now, the topic is British Israelism and European culture. We have a very insightful and educated guest who's going to kind of walk us through that a little bit. We're rebooting some things here. We have a little technical difficulty. It's okay. It happens. This is the world that we live in right now with computers and devices and all that good stuff. All right. We almost there, team. We good? You got to set your audio up. Okay, Dave, we still there? Dave, we there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay. You know how it goes? This is actually the first time this has happened, but hey.
Oh, it's okay.
So be it.
Technical difficulties happening.
It's okay. So let's do a little rewind. The question I asked was British Israelism. Let's start off with, what is it?
Well, British Israelism is this theory, and it claims that Germanic people, the Germanic tribes, basically the Scandinavians, Germans, Anglo-Saxons, the English, and some of the Celtic peoples of Europe. It states, it's a belief that this race of men is the true Israelites. They are the lost tribes of Israel, you could say.
Okay.
This theory, it came into, you first hear about it back in, I believe it was about 1840. There was various British writers, British authors and researchers and historians who had postulated this theory. And basically the theory states that, as I said, the Germanic races and the Celtic races are the true Hebrews, the true Israelites, and that they are the lost tribes of Israel that the Old Testament spoke of.
Okay. And in a nutshell, that's what it is. Now, you've said a few times, I heard you say the word theory. And so I want to, we're okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, I was just getting, okay, good. So you said the word theory, and where it started off with. Let's dig down into that a bit. What is your belief with that theory?
Honestly, I believe it's incorrect. I don't buy it one bit. Honestly, I'm not a fan of it. It seems there is this movement, and I've came into contact with these people online. It's called it's Christian identity, and they subscribe to this theory that we're God's chosen people, and that we were the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And honestly, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. And I honestly want no part of it, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Now, you mentioned all European peoples is what you mentioned. Germanic, you went into, I heard some Teutonic tribes there. You mentioned all European peoples. And the theory is that those set of people are the chosen Israelites. Why? What is the thought process behind that, in your opinion, as to why this is actually done? Why is this taught?
Well, my opinion is Okay. My thoughts on the whole thing is, and I mean, I have no problems with Christians. I mean, I was raised Christian.
Hmm.
I was raised Presbyterian, but I never quite felt a spiritual connection to it.
Okay.
Let's see. I enjoyed going to church as a child, and I enjoyed reading the Bible. I've not read the complete Bible, but I've read most of the Old Testament, and I think the first 6 books of the New Testament. I always found the Old Testament, as a young man, I always found the Old Testament to be much more interesting than the New Testament, because in the Old Testament you have all these lineages, you have all these fantastic stories, and honestly, the Old Testament it's a terribly violent time, as was the ancient world. You hear stories of men going out and battle. You hear of men taking harems and getting concubines and stuff. So as a young man, this really appealed to me in a way. But see, I think this whole Anglo-Israelism, British Israelism, is it was an attempt by the authors and the historians that formulated this theory. It's an attempt to reconcile our race with Christianity. I think it's a feeble attempt to basically associate ourselves with something that myself I don't believe it's Christianity. It's not of us. If you're from Northern Europe, I highly doubt. I mean, I see it as just a feeble attempt to connect us to something that we honestly are not connected to by blood.
Now you've said carefully that you didn't feel connected to the stories, no connection, and you're saying, hey, there's a reconciling here, there's a meshing, there's an attempt to put Europeans with, I'm going to use a term that you've utilized in the past, Abrahamic religions type sake, right? We're trying to piece it together. But it's a feeble attempt, and in your opinion, it just doesn't connect. Why? So, why the interest in your opinion? Why the interest in even trying to connect that? What's the gain?
Well, let's see. Christianity, it took over. It basically infiltrated Europe. As you know, the Romans, they basically carried out the crucifixion of Jesus. But it wasn't until around, I can't remember the exact year, but it was in the 300s when Constantine, the emperor of Rome, he had that vision before this huge battle of a flaming cross in the sky.
Right.
And after that, he decided to, he converted to Christianity, and he made it the state religion, basically, of the Roman Empire. So, I've lost my train of thought here.
No, take your time. Take your time. We're talking about why are we reconciling? What is this attempt? What's all this theory that's being created for what ends? What's the benefit of this?
Well, the way I see it, early Christianity, when it infiltrated and became accepted into Europe, it was a long, vicious struggle. It took centuries upon centuries to convert all the peoples of Europe. And in some ways, in some of the more rural, extremely rural northern parts of Europe, it really never took hold. I see Christianity was an early form of globalism, because if you notice during the Viking Age, for example, there is so many tales of the Vikings raiding and attacking Christians. And the Christians would consistently, send missionaries there and try to convert the people, and they didn't appreciate this. They didn't like it. They thought it was an alien faith. Where
were Christians sending missionaries? Where exactly?
Oh, okay. Well, it started out in Southern Europe. Basically, Christianity took hold in Rome, and if you look at over time, over the centuries, it seems that Christianity arose in more of the metropolitan urban centers of Europe. The rural countryside and the peoples there, they preferred to stick to their native European faith. and they were a lot slower to accept this change.
Okay.
And I think this whole it's just a desire that some of the more misguided historians of my race back then, it's this, they just felt they needed to be connected to it by blood, honestly, is how I see it. A lot of times, British Israelism, Anglo-Israelism, it's apparent in, a lot of white supremacist ideologies and stuff.
Yes.
But myself, I don't buy it one bit. I don't particularly care for it. I think it's nonsense and erroneous.
Is it so widespread, the acceptance of British Israelism, or it being something that's legitimate? Do you think it's something that is accepted, or even believe that the Queen and the King of England down their lines came all the way from King David's seed, and today they upkeep the house of David and the house of Israel, and they are the 10 lost tribes? Is that something that is actually accepted in a large number? Is it legitimate, or is this just kind of a type of a rumor thing over there? A couple words over there, a couple people say this and so on.
Well, a lot of the people that I speak to online, they believe this wholeheartedly. They're all Christian. A lot of them are Christian identity,
right?
And they believe this full-heartedly, that we came originally from what is now Israel and Judah, if you trace it back far enough. There's a sort of a missing link, I guess I should have mentioned a second ago.
Okay.
There was a large group of people back in several centuries before Christ was born, and they were called the Scythians, and they were basically from, I guess you would say, the Pontic steppe there in Eastern Europe and Russia. They were a large conglomeration of people. The name Scythians, it actually appears once in the Bible, and these people, they were nomadic steppe warriors, and a lot of people claim that the Germanic and the Celtic races of Europe are descended from these Scythians. And the people that I've spoke to online, the Christian identity people that believe in British Israelism, they think the Scythians were the 10 lost tribes. But myself, I don't buy it, honestly.
It seems that there are quite a bit of people who center around claiming the identity of the 10 lost tribes, as it's called, or the 12 tribes of Israel. It seems that there is definitely some form of motivation for people from all walks of life to say, hey, it is us. I've heard that out in Ethiopia, there's a line that came from Solomon, and for thousands of years they've remained, by themselves and isolated. They even have the Ark of the Covenant and all sorts of things. It seems that there's some sort of benefit to this, and I wonder what that would be. But here's my question. So, prior to, first, what year did this British Israelism thing start?
I believe I would have to look at it again, but it was sometime in the 1840s.
Okay.
I made a video a while back talking about this, but it was back in, I guess, May of last year.
17th
I should have looked it up before I came on here, but I didn't. I worked all day today, and I didn't really have the time. But it started in the 1840s, and it grew in popularity rapidly. It started in England, and also by extension, it also became very popular here in the United States around, I believe it was the 1870s through the 1900s.
And what, how was it actually actualized in the United States? I understand England, but how did it work in the States?
It was a very popular belief for many decades, and as I said, there's still there are still several people who believe in this theory. Although the numbers probably diminished over the decades, but there's still some that hold fast to this theory. I forget their names. I mentioned it in those videos, but there was a few scholars that had picked up on this in England, and they brought it over to the United States as well, and had talked about it in newspapers and various media publications. So yeah, it's I mean, I just don't buy it, not because I just don't buy it because there's all this evidence that suggests otherwise, and it goes contrary to my beliefs about our people and such. It just goes against the grain is the only way that I can put it.
And that's where my interest peaked, because it's quite evident that there is a European history and culture, a way of life that existed prior to 1840. When we go back, there's European regions, lands, language, expressions of worship, spiritual practices. It's all there that we could see. So it's interesting that, to pop up one day and say, hey, here we go, and hey, don't worry about this European thing. Don't worry about all that. We are actually of the 12 tribes of Israel. That's very interesting. I want you to walk us through some ancient European history. Let's give us some folklore, something that kind of distinguishes and separates yourself from that thought, that theory of British Israelism.
All right. Myself, I believe that Europeans, Northern Europeans especially, I believe that ultimately we are descended from the Neanderthals. You go back thousands, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years, there are certain, they have discovered like what you could call ritual burial mounds. That's what all of the native European faiths, the myths, whether it was Greek mythology, Roman, Norse, Germanic, Baltic, Slavic. If you look at it, and I've read some very interesting books the last couple of years on this topic, there was this, you're led to believe by academia and such, and because a lot of our distant history, it is shrouded in mystery, but you're led to believe that our distant ancestors, our distant European ancestors, they believed in all these fantastic tales, all these just outlandish things. But if you really look at it, and I believe the authors of the books that I have read, I believe they understand it the best. Our native European faith, our paganism or European polytheism, there's always this talk about, Valhalla amongst the Norse pagans. And if you look at it, the Havamal and the sagas by Snorri Sturluson, which he was the first, he was an Icelandic man that first recorded them back in the 1100s. They're made to be interpreted the way he had written them. You're led to believe that Valhalla is this warrior's heaven, but in reality, I think they believed in reincarnation. Okay. If you want to look at a modern world religion, Hinduism is probably the closest to our native European faith out of the major world religions, because they also believe in reincarnation. They have different deities for different things. Yeah,
and they're quite ancient. Hinduism is something that's pretty old.
Very ancient, very. And as what I was going back to is in these burial mounds that they have found of these Neanderthal skeletons, there's a common thread amongst many of them. They were buried with their possessions, and this is a trait, you see it all across the world. They did it in ancient Egypt, the Incas, all these, it's in all parts of the world. And I think all of paganism, there's a common root to it, I think. But with each, as the races divided and went into different parts of the world, they took up their own beliefs and they added their own flavor to it. But in all of these burial mounds in Europe and these burial sites, a common thing that they have noticed is throughout the many thousands of years, a lot of times when they discover one and they're looking at the skeletons laying there, in a lot of cases, they notice that the skull and the thigh bone is missing. And this was a ritual that stretches back for tens of thousands of years. And it was continued in Europe up until, Christianity became very prevalent and the practice was kind of dismissed. The reason that a lot of the skulls and the femur bones were missing out of the skeleton, out of the burial, is because the descendants of the one who had passed away, they would go into the burial mound, they would take the skull and the femur bone. The femur represents the physical, the skull represents the metaphysical. And it's all about remembering who you were in a past life. And that's why, honestly, if you look at it, celebrating Christmas, we give each other gifts. Christmas is, of course, a derivative of the pagan Yule. And we give each other gifts because if you look back, if you trace it back, it's oddly similar to a descendant going into his ancestor's burial mound and collecting his possessions, collecting the skull and the femur. And it's supposed to help them try to remember who they were in a past life.
Gotcha. Could you put a timeline to this, just so that we could kind of follow? So we're obviously talking about pre-Christianity. So how far BCE are we talking about here? This type of a practice?
Oh, it's at least 50,000 years is
50,000.
what I've read.
Okay. So it's something that goes way, 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 way back.
Yes, very, very far back.
Paganism. You've mentioned paganism and pagans. Two questions. What is a pagan? Two, what is the difference between paganism and Christianity as you see it?
Well, I see it as paganism. Honestly, paganism can extend basically to any race on this earth. As I mentioned earlier, the Indians, the Asiatic Indians, they have Hinduism. I was going to speak here later on a little bit about a group of people called the Khazars, the Khazars.
Let's go there later. Okay.
Let's
go there later. We're definitely talking about that. We'll get there.
Originally, the Khazars, they had a pagan steppe religion. The Khazars, they were a Turkic people. They probably originated somewhere around Central Asia, perhaps Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, but they expanded out during the Turkic expansion. Originally, they believed in Tengrism, which was their pagan steppe faith. You see it in all the cultures across the world, in Africa, especially in Europe, China, Japan. You see this all across the world. The Native Americans, they had their own views. Paganism, I think, is it's what comes natural, I think. At least to my race, I think paganism is our biospirit, and it's just about revering nature. I know it sounds like I'm a hippie or something right now, but it's about revering nature.
No, sir.
It's about revering nature. It's about seeing your place in nature, and it's about the belief in reincarnation. And there's so much more I could get into it, but that's basically how I see it. And of course, Christianity is, it's monotheistic in nature, and in a lot of ways, I can see Christianity as being not so natural. I don't think it's so natural to members of our race. But I mean, everybody's different, and if whatever worldview helps someone be a good person, I have no problem with it, if it helps them through life.
Now, Dave, I don't want you to hold your words back here. I don't want you to think that you can't say whatever you got to say.
Oh.
I'm pulling, and the reason for this is, if we stay on the top and kind of be shallow with it, then we don't get it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
We're talking. What we're talking here is we're talking culture. We're talking mixing of cultures. We're talking about practices going back, as you said, 50,000 years. You're talking about a similarity between you listed a whole slew of civilizations that did almost the same thing, and then poof, this Christianity thing came, and I hear where you're going and where you kind of say, let me just hold back. I hear where you're going with it. I want you to go there. I want you to feel comfortable,
Okay.
and I want you to go there. This is what this show is about.
All right.
I know what I'm getting into here, so it's
Okay.
you're right. I know what I'm getting into here, so go ahead.
Well, you see, monotheism, the monotheistic religions, they are all basically the Abrahamic religions, of course. They all stem with Judaism, I believe. You see these tribes that the ancient Hebrews, they came up with these tales to describe how the world was formed and how it got there, and how they came to be. Now, of course, Christianity came along many thousands of years later, and then a few hundred years later, we see the Islamic religion being founded by Muhammad. And if you look at it, I'm going to tell you a little story here.
Let's go, Dave. Let's go, Dave. Let's go.
If you look in our ancient myths, in our ancient European myths, and it even extends to the Mesoamericans, there's stories of Quetzalcoatl, and a lot of these fantastic tales and myths, and it's the same throughout the world, and it's even the same in the Abrahamic faiths. You have a story of a hero having to rescue a maiden. There's, the story of Sigurd in Norse mythology. And there's so many tales of a hero saving a maiden from a beast, usually a serpent or a dragon. And if you look at it, and I mean, there's tales of this all across the world. The story of creation of Adam and Eve, it mentions a man and a woman. And I also forgot to mention, there's usually something involving a tree in a lot of these tales. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden tale. And there is also a serpent. And honestly, and I watched a video of a guy, he had made this video talking about it, and it makes so much sense. You see in the Norse and the mythological tales, the hero, he fights the serpent, he slays the serpent, and then he will either get the maiden's hand in marriage, or perhaps he gets some fantastic treasure item of some sort. And as I said,
reward, some form of a reward.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And I think, honestly, that the story of Adam and Eve is a version of this tale, except in this version, the hero falls. He is tricked by the serpent. Eve is tricked by the serpent. And by extension, Eve convinces Adam to eat of the fruit. And basically, God banishes them from the Garden of Eden. So that's where it starts to be different, basically just within that tale right there. And then it just it branches out to completely opposite ends of what I would consider the religious spectrum, I guess, if you could call it that.
So do you find that, and that's very interesting, do you find that the tales with the various trees, serpents, gold, treasures, whatever it may be, in all other stories or versions of the stories, the hero wins?
Yeah, he usually wins.
And in this particular...
in the Abrahamic faith, it's kind of twisted, I guess you could say, because we honestly lost if you subscribe to that train of thought. We were cast away from the Garden of Eden. We were
Mm-hmm.
sentenced to a life of toil and trial. We're going to bruise the serpent's head. And I mean, childbirth became a very painful
Yes.
event.
Yep. Yep. It's different. I understand where
Yes.
you're going. It's different. And from the perspective of let's say all of the other nations, let's say, who have their version of the story, they have a similar version. This particular one is like, wait a second, it's different. The hero falls and there's there's some sort of disobedience. It looks as some form of disobedience and some sort of punishment that's given because of it. That's certainly interesting. Let's ask you. Okay, sorry, I didn't want to stop you. Were you done there?
Oh yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay, you're good there. All right. So the impact of, let me frame this question right. It changes because of the information you just provided. So we have, I'm going to use the 50,000 year mark. We have a 50,000 year mark. We have similarities in cultures, let's just call it that. And perhaps you called it nature, spiritual systems, similarities. Then poof, out of nowhere, 50,000 years later, there's this Abrahamic thing, as you call it. I'm using your terminology here. Abrahamic thing falls into place. There's different eras. There's as you said, there's the 12 tribe time, and then there's a time where Christianity comes into play sometime after, and then Islam and so on and so forth. What is the impact? What is the impact of this new culture, this new thing, on these ancient cultures?
Well, there was an immense impact basically on the entire world, looking back all these centuries and millennia later.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed to have definitely had a profound impact on the ancient Israelites, on the ancient Hebrews. You see, they began to record their lineage. They have all these stories. They have the story of Noah and the flood. Basically, and there's a story of a flood there's a lot of stories across the world that mention a flood. And the impact is huge. You see, and I mean, the ancient Israelites, they are able to, their history is recorded so far back,
Mm-hmm.
and it's amazing in a way because they've had all these trials and tribulations over the many centuries. They were in, let's see, Joseph led them down into Egypt. They eventually became enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the Babylonians coming in and conquering them. You have the Persians. But it's amazing in a way that they've kept this faith. It's amazing that they've kept all of this intact over thousands upon thousands of years. So the impact is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, with the advent of Christianity and Islam, the impact across the world is it's immensely profound. I mean, there's no way to honestly imagine history without it, the way I see it.
In recent times, obviously. Is that impact positive, negative?
I think it's negative in a lot of ways. At least for Europeans, at least for those of my race. I think in a lot of ways it has been negative, to tell you the truth.
Now, take your time, and this is where I want you to go. Explain that. Let's walk this slowly. We're going to have people who are going to be commenting on this. I assure you, and
yeah.
they're going to be European, and they're going to say this guy has gone completely crazy. Where'd you get this guy? Right? We're going to get all of that, and that's cool. Everybody can say whatever they want to say, but I want to hear this, and I want everybody to hear this. Walk it slow. The impact.
Okay.
The impact of Christianity upon Europeans, Dave, the Southern Nordic, has said he views it as negative. I release it back to you.
I think it is largely negative. There are so many people that I speak to, these Christian identitarians. They talk about
Okay, looks like it's frozen. We'll give it a moment. We know that Dave is out in a rural area where he does a lot of fishing and hunting and stuff. I've seen some of his stuff. So perhaps some of the internet and Wi-Fi is a little bit spotty, but we'll give him a moment. That's okay. Now, if feel free to call in. Call in. This is a live call-in show. I actually don't even take a look at live chats and all that. That's it does its own thing. Call in, ask your questions, state your point, whatever it is that you want to say, and I'm sure Dave would get back to you. Okay. So okay, we lost Dave. I'm sure he'll be back in a moment. Phone numbers are right here. Where are we right now? We're talking to Dave, the Southern Nordic, and we've said quite a bit, or he said quite a bit. Where we are at the moment is, Dave has said that Christianity has impacted, in his opinion, has impacted European life, society, community, civilization, negatively. Okay, we're glad you're back, Dave. Okay, let's pick up right where you left off.
Sorry about that.
All good.
I lost internet connection.
Yeah,
anyway,
all good.
I see it as overall a negative because a lot of these people that I speak to, they think that Christianity, if you talk to these same people, they will tell you that in Northern Europe, the Germanic and the Slavic tribes, the Baltic tribes, they would tell you that basically our distant ancestors were living in mud huts and that we had no sense of anything. We were barbaric savages. And
I've heard the such. I've heard the such.
Yeah, it's completely wrong. Mm-hmm. It's a complete nonsense, in my opinion.
Okay.
They forget, too, that if you look at it, just looking at the Roman civilization, the Hellenic civilization of ancient Greece, the Minoans, these were advanced civilizations that came about thousands of years before Christianity, before Christ even lived. And they were pagan in nature. They followed their native European faith. And overall, I see Christianity as a negative, largely because it goes against our biospirit, our biological spirit, our biological inclination. I think Christianity, a lot of its teachings are inherently unnatural. And I think that Christianity, okay, let me backtrack here. I see civilization. Now, I'm not necessarily saying technology here because if you look at it, I see technology as a double-edged sword. It has good applications. If it wasn't for technology, I wouldn't be able to be speaking to you right now. But also, if you look at it in modern life, technology has done so many things to ruin the modern man. And by extension, civilization has done the same. Let me ask you this. If you look at a picture, say compare two pictures here, picture in your mind. Take a picture of a cute, cuddly little Shih Tzu or a little Chihuahua, all right? You look Chihuahua, all right? And then in another picture in your mind, where did a Chihuahua or a Shih Tzu originally come from? If you look back at it, they came originally from wolves. So put those two pictures side by side.
Right.
Wolf on one hand, who is fierce, proud, majestic. And then you have the Chihuahua or the Shih Tzu on the other hand. They are smaller. They are a lot more docile. They're domesticated.
Right.
And see, it's the same if you look at it in the skeletons of our ancient European ancestors, and it's the same. You've got the Denisovans over there in East Asia. And I mean, it's all across the world. The Neanderthals and the Denisovans, and I know there's many other ancient humanoids that I'm missing here. Homo erectus is one. Australopithecus, I can't even pronounce it, and I'm not going to try to. But if you look at these people, at these distant humanoid ancestors, they were all much more sturdily built than us. They had a larger head, a larger jaw, and honestly, they were made to survive out in the wild so much better than a modern human is today. You know, I see it that domestication has ruined a lot of things about us. Now, I'm not saying, and I think civilization is ultimately a bad thing, to tell you the truth, because it softens us. You see it more than ever. Just in the last few decades, it's amazing to me just how soft so many. And I'm saying this about myself too. My great grandparents, they were much harder people than I am. And see, Christianity, it divorced us from our native European faith, our native European worldview. And Christianity helped bring in more civilization, it seemed like. When the various kingdoms across Europe, when their leaders, usually their leaders were either bribed into accepting Christianity, or they basically, if a leader resisted, he was eventually killed in battle, and they installed a leader that was friendly to Christianity. See, as I said earlier, I see Christianity as a form of globalism, and I certainly oppose globalism in all its forms, and I just see Christianity as exactly that, and I think it's led so many of our people astray over the years, over the thousands of years now, over the centuries.
Can you, Dave? You said a mouthful right there.
I know.
Could you give possibly one or two examples that we can draw on today, where Christianity has impacted Europeans specifically negatively? Draw us a picture here. What culturally has been removed? Where have Europeans been placed where they would be better in another scenario?
Well, one of the first and largest things.
And keep it real. Keep it real. Keep it real.
All right.
All right.
One of the largest things that I see is one of the inherent teachings of Christianity, and that is basically to pray your enemy, to take care of your enemy, basically to turn the other cheek. In Europe, there is a crisis right now. It's been going on the last, I'm guessing since about around 2015. And that is all the refugees flooding into Europe. And you see, this is Christianity, it teaches this sort of thing. It basically teaches you to be docile, to be complacent, and to be accepting of these foreign peoples. Now, it's not just a few migrants coming in. That's been happening for decades, but it seems like our never-ending war, our U.S. intervention, our never-ending wars in the Middle East is a huge part of why this situation is occurring. But going to Christianity, I think of Catholicism. And just a little while back, I think it was a year or two ago, I remember seeing a picture of Pope Francis. And they had made this huge bronze cast statue. I guess it was, I can't remember if it might have been in the Vatican or somewhere in that part of Italy. And this huge statue, it's untelling how much it cost to be built. Basically, it's praising these migrants. The migrants, and I noticed something funny. It's easy to see. The statue is very detailed. It's huge, and it's got all these human figures. A lot of them you can tell are Middle Eastern, they're Arabic, Turkic. But I thought it was oddly funny to me that the leading man and woman on that statue, if you look closely at them, they're Jewish. You can see it easily that they are Jewish, and you see the Pope is encouraging Europe to accept all of these migrants. I see it in all of these various pictures that people have taken across Europe. It says Christians welcome refugees. There is so many pictures. All you have to do is Google it, and there's just a rows upon rows of it.
Mm-hmm.
And see, I think that Christianity is universalism, and you know, it's it's a universal faith. It's for everyone, and I mean that's what it is by nature. And but I don't think it's for us, honestly. I think it hinders us, and it makes us naive in a way. Now I'm not saying that all these migrants coming over are like bad people, but you see all across Europe there's all these instances where there's a culture clash between these Asians,
Mm-hmm.
these Middle Easterners. They're coming over. There's a lot of violence that happens at times. If you're curious about it, look up this game called Taharush, and it's a very disgusting game, and it's a game that basically involves a group of Arab men getting together and raping European women. I mean, there's video. It's terrifying.
Sorry, you said this is a game?
It's a game, yeah. It's called Taharush, and it's horrifying because these men, they'll be in these large crowds. I posted a video about it a while back. It was up in Sweden, and you know, there's a large swaths of these cities that you can't travel in at night. You don't even want to go there during World War I.
Mm-hmm.
And someone caught it on video. These group of Arab men, like a mass of them, probably 50. They had got these two white girls, and they were basically, I guess it was a bridge, and there was a walkway under it. And those girls are screaming, and these Arab men are just hurting them in there to do what God knows what. But yeah, I mean, it's just culture clash. You know, it's completely destructive. And honestly, there's a group of people that benefit from this, and they're not honestly Arab or European, the way I see it.
Now, and thank you for that. Now, so there is a thought. So you've explained, and I see that where you have cultures clashing, and within cultures becoming or attempting to become one culture, there are still subcultures. There would always still be some sort of cliquism, for lack of a better word. There would always be some sort of cliquism. And as you displayed in that game, not much of a game, but that it's ridiculous. But you have one set of people playing that game, and the victims are, as you said, white people, right? So we have two sets of people or cultures clashing. Here's the thought. The thought is, with Christianity, and I know, you know, you distinguish. You started off when you said Abrahamic, you went into the 12 tribes, and then you went into Christianity, which came, you know, some time after, thousands after. Some of Christianity's cultures or practices merge with some of these ancient European cultures. They merge, such as I'll just toss them out there: Halloween's, your Christmases. You had made mention of the Yule celebration, and we know the Yuletide, and we, you know, all these things. The Christmas tree. It's Nordic, right? Reindeers. It's Nordic in nature. Some of these things kind of amalgamate. Does that help in this type of a situation? Would that help you, or does that make it a little bit easier seeing bits and pieces of perhaps some European culture mixed with this Christianity thing?
Well, that's a good question you asked there. I'll go back to the Christianization of Europe. there was a huge struggle, as I mentioned earlier, in the Christianization of Europe. It started out largely in the metropolitan areas. Um, say Rome was the first city to adopt Christianity as its native faith, as its state religion, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you have, Athens. Christianity, of course, it branches off over the centuries. You have the East. I guess there's the three large denominations. There's Eastern Orthodox, there's Catholicism, and then you have Protestantism, which came several centuries later. But in order to get a lot of kings, and this happened up in Norway, imagine King Olaf. He's actually a canonized saint in the Catholic Church. He's Saint Olaf. But the Norwegians who lived under him,
Mm-hmm.
they had a very different name for him. They called him Olaf the Fat. They despised him because he was a Christian king and was basically forcing a lot of his countrymen to adopt Christianity. And it was basically a large civil war back in I believe it was the early 1000s. Olaf the Fat, he was eventually killed by one of his own warriors named Thorir Hund, which was Thorir the Hound, basically. It's a very interesting story. Now, in order for these leaders, these kings, to get them to accept Christianity, they had a huge struggle because the people were rejecting it. And this was all across Europe. You see the same things happening when basically England was Christianized. England was Christianized, I believe, around in the mid 500s or 600s. The Anglo-Saxons and the Celtic peoples there, they accepted Christianity more readily, it seemed. You see the Franks in Europe, in France, basically. That's what the country of France, of course, is named after. The Franks were a Germanic tribe that had came down into modern-day France from, I believe it was around central Germany. And they became Latinized, though, due to that part of that Gaul, which was the name for France before they called it France.
Mm-hmm.
Gaul was in close contact with Rome and the Roman Empire over the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it spread from Rome, basically. And the only way a lot of these religious leaders of early church and the kings, the monarchs who had converted to Christianity, the only way that they could get so many of their subjects to accept Christianity was by adopting so many pagan practices. It's astounding, really. It's like you mentioned earlier, the Christmas tree was a Germanic tradition. The Slavic cultures, they had a similar practice. Let's see. And I mean, there's more examples than I can think of right now that I've read about. If you look at it, Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity, the Eastern Orthodox branch, they are more similar to our native European faith
Mm-hmm.
than Protestantism is.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at it, the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, they have saints. They have saints that they revere. Like I mentioned earlier, Saint Olaf, he was canonized by the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, if you think about it, these saints are not too different. I know I'm not being the saints on the same pedestal as, God and the Virgin Mary and such, but that's kind of a polytheistic practice there, is because apotheosis, these martyrs, these Christian martyrs who had died for their faith trying to spread it, the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, they elevated them. Mm-hmm. They elevated their status, and it's kind of a form of apotheosis, you see, where the deceased takes on an immortal aspect.
Mm-hmm. Which sounds almost similar to what you were explaining earlier, in terms of what's natural, right? It seems like it's the same. It's a little different, but same type of practice. And they're European, and the practices you spoke of anciently are also European as well.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Continue on, please.
You can look at the the holiday of Easter, which was originally it was a pagan holiday. They called it Oster or Oster, which, I mean, if you translate it from Ost in German is east. And originally it was a celebration of reincarnation, of rebirth. Usually, I can't remember which full moon it is, but Easter, basically, it's predicated upon on the lunar calendar. Basically, Easter, it doesn't have a set date each year, unlike Christmas. But Easter, it occurs usually sometime in April. Some years it's in around the last week of March. Easter was a pagan celebration celebrating the rebirth. See, so much of paganism, if you get down to the essential elements of it, basically revolves around keeping up with time, the various cycles of the year. You have fall, Halloween. In the pagan practice, Halloween was basically when winter was starting to come in. And it was a celebration remembering death, the death of ancestors. So you had Yule, which was basically, it was synonymous with the winter equinox, the shortest day of the year, which is in our calendar, December 21st, And that's funny, too, that they put Jesus' birthday, the Christian church puts his birthday as December 25th, because I've read two different things before. I have read that they say that they think that Jesus was born in March, sometime in March. And then I've also read somewhere else stating that he was born in October. I'm not sure which is which, but from what I've read and gathered over time, December 25th wasn't when Jesus was born, but they moved the holiday of his birth to that date in order to help convert these ancient Europeans over. It basically made Christianity more palatable to them because they had resisted.
Of course.
And see, Easter was a celebration, as I said. It comes in the spring when basically, the trees, the deciduous trees are starting to get their leaves. The grass is getting greener. The temperatures are getting warmer. Life is returning. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you a second ago.
No, go ahead.
But yeah, I was handing it off back to you there.
Okay. Yeah.
That's about all I can speak of on it right now.
That's a well-rounded answer, if you ask me. Very well-rounded, and it seems so. It's interesting because you have it seems like two sets of Europeans, because when we boil it down, we say they, because you're saying they changed. They are the Romans and those that followed, which are Europeans. And they utilize some of their pagan practices to make it more palatable so that some of their kinfolk would follow along. And it's interesting. Why not? Why not just keep it the same? Why have this new, I'm going to say, quote, unquote, type of practice called Christianity, and then incorporate some of the old practices? You said saints. It's just straight idolatry, what it is, and you incorporate it so that you can bring people over to this new thing. Well, why not just keep the old thing? And I think that's what you're kind of saying. Why not? Yeah. What are we doing here? If there's something completely brand new and it requires you to leave your culture, leave your way of life, and you divorce it, as you said, you divorce your roots, you plug into this new thing, okay, that's what you do. But this new thing, quote unquote, is not actually a new thing. It has elements of the old thing, which is why the old people moved to this quote unquote new thing. Interesting. Very, 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 very interesting. So God, I have to ask this. So let's go back 50,000 years. As you said, God, what is the concept of of God? Is there a concept of God? Or is it just deity worship, ancestral worship, those that have passed type of worship, that type of thing? What is the concept?
Okay.
And specifically, obviously, we're speaking about European.
Yeah. If you look at it in the myths, a lot of the gods, Odin, Zeus, Thor, in Slavic mythology, you have Svarog. There's thousands of gods. There's so many more gods that you never hear about. It's just you only hear about the mainstream ones. But if you delve deeper into the various mythologies of Europe, there's thousands of gods. A lot of them were just localized gods. That there's a very interesting channel called The Antlered One here on YouTube, and he does a lot of research into a lot of these more obscure deities. But I think there certainly was a concept, basically across the world, all these ancient hominids. There was a concept of they were just part of something greater. There's something greater than themselves. Myself, I certainly believe there is an intelligent design to this world, to this universe. I believe there is an intelligent design, and I believe certainly that we all have a spirit, a soul. What separates me from, I guess you could say, Christians or any of the other Abrahamic faiths, I think our spirit, my soul, is the same soul that perhaps my great-great-grandfather had, or great-great-grandmother. And, it extends. It's what it's all about, reincarnation. We're basically, I'm my ancestors, and they are me. Because, not only in the biological sense, as I mentioned earlier, the Neanderthal, they had that ritual where they would gather the skull and the femur, and some of say there's various instruments, perhaps a spear or a flint spear point, a flint knife of some sort, a dagger. The descendant would come in there around the age of 7. The number 7 is very symbolic in paganism as well, as is the number 9 and 12 and 3. And that's a kind of a common ground we see between Christianity and paganism. 7 is one of the holiest numbers there is. But at the age of 7 is when the descendant, led by his parents, his mother, usually his mother, would enter the burial mound, collect the femur and the skull and some of the possessions in order to help foster, perhaps when that child would walk in, that young Neanderthal walked in there and seen that huge spear point, he would remember something. He may not be able quite to put his finger on it, but he would remember a glimpse of what he was in his past life. It's all about forging a connection. But yeah, I certainly believe, we have souls or a spirit, and the only thing that separates me from Christianity, I guess in Christianity, you either go to heaven or you go to hell. Myself, I think that if we live an honorable life, if we try to do what's right, then we will be reborn in our descendants.
Copy. And that seems to be a theme in most cases, so a little bit different here and there in ancient philosophies. That seems to be a theme. There's some type of a revisit, some type of a reincarnation, as it's called.
Absolutely.
And I understand. So you're taking the stance of culturally of ancient practices within your culture.
Yeah.
Understood.
And I believe there's examples of this happening in other cultures as well. You look at the Denisovans, which were basically the Neanderthal equivalent, and it's been postulated that modern East Asians are ultimately descended from these Denisovans. They were similar to the Neanderthal. You see it all across. You see it in Incan burial sites. It's all across the world. You see it in ancient Egypt. I'm sure there's places in sub-Saharan Africa you see a similar practice.
Guaranteed. Right
Yeah.
through Africa, right? Yeah, guaranteed. It's very very interesting, and it's what's interesting is that you kind of see and you distinguish the difference, not biblically, but just culturally. You see that, hey, there's a difference in what's done anciently around the world, globe wide, and biblically, but not necessarily in the Christian worldview. Dave,
Yeah.
let's get into it.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Khazars. Let's talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
the Khazars. Let's talk about it.
Oh, this
Yep, let's go.
is a very interesting period in history. As I said earlier, growing up, I was extremely interested in ancient history up to around the year 1100. And then my interest, it kind of wanes off until basically the 20th century arrives. I was always greatly interested in the Dark Ages in Europe. There's so much we really don't know about it, but we can try to piece things together. There is a theory, and it's called the Khazar theory. Okay. And there is this huge debate as to whether this theory is correct. Myself, I'm undecided on it, honestly, but I do think that there is something to it. I think there is weight to it.
Mhm.
Okay, and you know, it's funny to me too, is because I had never heard this up until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I didn't even know what a Khazar was. If you had asked me what it was, I would have been like, is that a breed of sheep or something?
It is
I'd
something that
never
has
heard
been
of
it's become popular, probably going through the 90s here, mid 90s and up. It's something that's you'll see a lot of websites, a lot of discussions about this theory, as called the Khazars. But yeah, it's spoken about. There's a discussion happening.
Oh yes,
There's a discussion.
A lot of people will call the Khazar theory anti-Semitic, and I will explain why, because it involves Jews. Okay, during I believe it was the 8th century, there was a group of people they called themselves the Khazars. They were a Turkic people, meaning they spoke the Turkic languages. And they came out of Central Asia. Think, as I mentioned earlier, Turkmenistan, Turkmen, kind of where that country got its name from. That region of Central Asia, the Turkic people there, they had a huge expansion. They spread they spread north, and they basically spread west. The modern day country of Turkey, of course, is named after these same people. The Khazars, they came up from Central Asia. They moved northwest. They probably crossed Caucasus Mountains. And around the year 800, these tribes, the Khazars, these Turkic tribes, over the decades, they formed an immensely wealthy cognate, which cognate is just another word for kingdom. They called their leaders a Kagan, which is, synonymous with king. Now, the Khazars, they grew very immensely wealthy because their kingdom was set basically in the western side of Russia and the Ukraine. They were basically on the east shore of the Black Sea. And their little cognate, it stretched across to the Volga River, further east in Russia. They grew immensely wealthy. And how did they do this? Basically, they grew wealthy because of the strategic importance of their location. Because if you look at it on a map, Khazaria, which was cognate, the region, it was situated strategically. It was central to the Silk Road, and of course, you know, was these various trails, these various roads, these various paths leading from all across Europe on over into China and India. It was a way that the more wealthy Europeans of the time, these Vandals, the Franks in Francia, the Byzantine Empire, you know, it was an important trade route, the Silk Road. And the Khazars, they, due to their centralized location, they would charge taxes. They would tax the goods that were shipped through their cognates. And they grew immensely wealthy because of it was just a centralized location. Now, the Khazars, as I mentioned, were a Turkic people. And I think it was from 700 up until about 965 AD, they grew immensely wealthy and immensely powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime, I believe it was in the late 800s, the Khazars, one of their kings, his name was, I believe it was Bulan, and he was facing a lot of pressure because also during this time, you have the Byzantine Empire, which was probably by far the most strongest European nation at that time. The Byzantine Empire, it was very wealthy, and it was basically, you know, formed from the remnants of the Eastern, you could call it the Eastern Roman Empire. You know, they had Constantinople,
right. Yep,
and they were Christian. Now, of course, there was no difference between the split in Catholicism and the Orthodox churches, the Eastern Orthodox churches. It didn't happen for another 100 years, I believe, until 1054, when the Great Schism occurred. Mm. But you had them; they were eyeing. They had a lot of interest in Khazaria, and they wanted to conquer them, of course, but they were also kind of weary because Khazaria was they had grown very wealthy, and with wealth comes power, and with power comes the need to build up a fairly formidable military force.
Right.
You also have in the south in the rise of the Islamic caliphates out of Baghdad. So basically, and up until this time, the Khazars, they practiced a pagan steppe religion that I mentioned earlier called Tengrism. Well, King Bulan, Kagan Bulan, as I should say, he was having to deal with what I would call diplomatic pressure. He was being pressured by the Byzantine Empire, by their emperor, to accept Christianity. Due to his south, directly south, basically, over, not sure how many miles it is, but on south, Baghdad, of course, was rising tremendously. Islam, it had a huge effect on the Middle East and the Arab world. The Islamic caliphates were growing immensely powerful. So he was also, and especially as earlier, Khazaria was a kind of a multi-ethnic area. It was basically centralized, so there was a lot of people coming in and leaving. You know, it was a very, in a way, I guess you could say, a diverse place. Mm-hmm. They were facing, King Bulan, he was facing tremendous pressure from the Christians, from the Byzantine Empire to accept Christianity. He was facing tremendous pressure from the south, from Baghdad, to accept Islam. And he spoke to leaders. He spoke to Christian authorities from Byzantium, and he also spoke to Islamic authorities. But he also invited a third religion, and that was Judaism. He spoke to leaders of the Jewish faith. And he basically accepted pitches, I guess you could say, from the leaders of each of these faiths, these missionaries, and he told them that he would need some time to decide upon a faith. And he thought about it for, it's untelling how long, but I'm sure he came up with a fairly quickly. He decided upon Judaism. And think about it, that's a very smart political play. It's a very smart tactical play. Because if he accepts Judaism and tries to lead the Khazars into accepting that faith, he's not technically having to bend his knee to the Byzantine Empire pushing Christianity, and he's not having to bend his knee to the Islamic caliphates of the South. Yet he is still in that Abrahamic fold.
Gotcha.
As I said earlier, these Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, and Islam, they're all inherently tied to each other. And now, it's hard to tell. It's very hard to tell how many exactly of the Khazar people practiced Judaism. It's apparent that the leaders, after King Balon, they all adopted Judaism as their faith. It's hard to tell exactly how many of the actual people also practiced it. I would say there was a fair number, but as I said, it's hard to tell. Now, how is this called anti-Semitic? It goes completely against if you look at it, the Jewish race, the Jewish religion. It's funny because it is a race and a religion. There are three large classes, if I remember correctly. There's the Ashkenazim, there are the Mizrahim, and then there is the Sephardim. The Mizrahim, excuse me, I'm getting tongue-tied. The Mizrahi Jews, they are the Jews who remained in the Middle East. The Sephardic Jews are the Jews that inhabited the Iberian Peninsula. And then the Ashkenazi Jews are by far the largest branch of the three branches of Judaism. I think I've read before that 85 to 90% of all Jews on this earth are Ashkenazi Jews. And Ashkenazi means they are the Jews of Europe. Basically,
they're European.
From Eastern Europe.
They're European.
Yeah, there's European admixture. Yes.
Right.
We consider this to be anti-Semitic because this whole theory it goes against their view of chosen people. Basically, it's saying that a large branch of Jews are not God's chosen people, and they are not even from Israel originally. So and then there's this huge debate about it. I've seen arguments from both sides. It's really hard to tell. I think there's some weight to it, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it's a very interesting story nonetheless. Khazaria, it was destroyed in the year 965 by Sviatoslav the Brave. He is a very popular historical figure in Russia and Ukraine. He was a pagan, and he led the Kievan Rus, which were a branch of they say they came from Sweden. They were a branch, the Eastern Vikings. They called them Varangians. They were the Vikings who had sailed down the Danube River. They think they originated in Sweden. But he was a pagan leader, and he was also pressured by the Byzantine Empire to accept Christianity. But in the year 965, he destroyed the capital of Khazaria, which was called Atil. He utterly destroyed it. And it severely weakened Khazaria, and it basically just fell apart over the last couple of centuries, over the 2 centuries following it. Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
No, hey, you took all the time required, and I didn't want to say anything because I want to get it laid out in the form that you did, and it was done very well. And your belief is you're still kind of hung with, is this something that's real, not fairy tales? You're kind of.
Honestly, I don't. I believe that it is. I believe there is some credibility to it, but it's not. It's just not that important to me, really. I think it's just a very interesting story, and I think And it's something I paid attention very closely in history class growing up. Even when I was in college years ago, I paid very close attention. I never want see, and that's a shame. It seems like here in America, you don't hear anything about Eastern European history, and it's very rich, and it's a shame, I think. But yeah, I'm 50-50 on it, I guess. I think there's something to it, but then I mean, it's not that important to me, honestly.
Gotcha. It almost seems as if, there's a certain era within European history that is quieted. It's quieted,
Oh yeah.
and there must be some reason behind it. We could speculate, but a lot of the cultural expressions of that era you can find in Christianity, and that's what's very interesting. Right, a lot of mixture between it. So, Dave, let's go to common time. Let's go to America. And I'm going to ask you the tough question here. The United States of America has mixtures and cultures, a melting pot of ideals, expressions, languages, thoughts, spiritual practices, all of that good stuff. Is that practical?
Well, honestly, I mean, see, earlier, as I mentioned, with the migrant crisis in Europe, I don't think it's practical. But then again, here in the United States, that's why I see what is happening in Europe to be such a tragedy, is because Europe is our ethnic homeland. It's where our race is from. And a lot of times, honestly, to tell you the truth, I think we should have stayed there. Because, I mean, after all this here in the United States, this isn't our land. The Native Americans were here first. Now,
Right.
it's a very difficult subject to talk about. There's so many different opinions. I'm of the belief, though, that multiracial societies, they tend to have conflict. I mean, we see it here in the United States, and it's happened in various parts of the world over the centuries. Now, this is a very interesting thing. I'm not a very big fan of the term democracy so much.
Mm-hmm.
We hear it so much in our media. I've seen this chilling compilation. I think it came out a year or so ago, where it's got all these different TV screens, and it's like all these various local news stations. They're reading the same script, saying this is a threat to our democracy. And democracy works if and Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, he is quoted as saying, democracy works if there is a racially homogeneous society. And societies that are multiracial, it seems that they tend to function only well as if there is a tyrant, as if they're under a tyrannical, an authoritarian rule. Now, I don't think it's practical, because there's just so much conflict that arises. We see it especially just in the past year with all the racial tension here in the United States. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, And my dad, he said the same thing to me before. It's remarkable. Now, I'm of the opinion, I view what is going on in Europe as a much bigger, there's a lot of people that are, here in the United States, people of my race, who are horrified with the idea of all these Central Americans coming up from Honduras, and the importation of different races from the Middle East and elsewhere in the world. And, I mean, I can understand their concerns. In a lot of ways, they are my concerns as well. But I see it here in America. We were basically multiracial as soon as the first European stepped off the boat here in the United States. And I mean, back then, you know, we had tons of racial strife. Basically, the Native American is a sad ghost of what his once proud race formerly was, and you know it's heartbreaking to see.
Accurate way of saying it. A sad ghost.
It's sad to see,
yeah.
You know.
Yep.
And basically, that's why I'm saying I see the flooding of migrants into Europe as a much more distressing ordeal than what we see here in the United States. Because as soon as the first European stepped off the boat, we were multiracial. There was Africans that were brought over as slaves, and then I guess in the 18th or somewhere around the mid 19th century, you see a lot of Chinese coming over, and they were basically working on the railroads out west, you know. And it's sad to say, you know, that some people in the circles that I speak to, they think, you know, the United States was set up to be a white ethno state. And I mean, that's completely, there's nothing farther from the truth, I think, honestly. Because although, you know, I think in the Constitution, or I'm not an expert at this, I could be wrong on some of this, but, you know, there for many, many years, maybe up until, I think it was maybe in the 1920s, I could be completely wrong, but basically they didn't want to accept anyone into this country unless they were of Western European descent, whether they were from Germany, England, Scandinavia. And then,
why was that? What was the reason for that? What was the reason for that?
Honestly, I can't think of it right now. I can't remember what it was the Immigration Act of something. Okay. But, you know, there for many years, they wanted to only accept, as I said, people to become American citizens. And, you know, but then again, you look at it, we brought slaves over. There was slaves coming over from the get-go, basically from before the time America was even a thing.
Right.
So, you know, it's, I mean, it's the idea that our founding fathers wanted this to be an exclusively white ethno state is completely, it's silly, you know, it's absolutely silly. I mean, if you wanted it to be that way, why did you allow slaves to be brought over? Why did you, I mean, it's just pointless. That's why I've always said, I always see what's happening in Europe the last several years to be a huge tragedy, because that is our ethnic homeland. And a lot of times I have thought before that I would love to return to Denmark, which is where, as I said, my paternal line is from. I would be fine with returning to Europe, you know. I mean, I love it here in America. I love it here in the Appalachians. I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. But I mean, I know for a fact this isn't where I'm from. And I think ultimately that, especially with the racial tension that we see today, I hate to say it, but I think in a lot of ways there's going to be some event happen during my lifetime, and it's going to lead to a sort of collapse of the United States as we see it. I could foresee something happening, and we balkanize, basically. We separate.
Is this I never asked you, are you a practicing Christian of some sort, or no? Okay, so this...
No, I'm not.
So this thought process has nothing to do with prophetic or anything. This is just you analyzing and saying something's got to give here, man. The pot's bubbling, and something's got to give here, man. Something's got to happen. So this is just your inner thought saying, yeah, I don't know when, sometime in your lifetime, there's got to be some separating of the peoples. Okay.
Yes.
Outside of that, is there a way to fix the situation as you see it? Or better question, how do you fix it?
Well, honestly, how I see, one thing I do is I don't watch the news anymore. The only place I honestly get my news from is perhaps YouTube, Twitter, or BitChute. I don't watch any of the mainstream sources. I think they are extremely divisive, and I think they try to agitate people. I think they try to whip people into a frenzy a lot of times, and I mean, honestly, it works. It works whether if you're on the right side of the political spectrum or the left side of the political spectrum. The power that the media holds is just it's horrifying in a lot of ways. My way of looking at it, how do you fix it? I don't know if it can be fixed. A lot of times, I hate to say it, I wish civilization sometime is going to collapse. It may not even be in my lifetime, and I think it's going to be a much more difficult thing to happen than a lot of people I've heard talk about it say. I think because civilization is quite resilient. I mean, we look at it, we've made it through this pandemic fairly intact. Myself, I consider it
hopefully.
Yeah. Oh, but I mean, it's just natural. Things what is it? Is it Murphy's Law that it's called? I believe that basically if something can screw up, it will.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. But
sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about
right. The way I think to fix it, I don't know if we can fix it on a governmental level or honestly on a societal level. I think the way to fix it is on a personal level. And the personal way to do it is to go about leading a more simple life, a more natural life. As I said, I try not to lose anymore because there's just so much negativity involved with it. It's good to be aware somewhat of what's going on, but I try not to delve too deeply in it because it's just there to make you feel. I think it's there to make you feel powerless in a lot of ways, and I think it's there to just burden you with a lot of worry. As I said, it's just on a personal level. I try to get out in nature more. I've got me a garden I'm planting. We just moved into our house I guess it's about 8 months ago now. We've got a little bit of land here. And I tell you, I feel a lot. The last couple of years before we moved here, I lived in an apartment, and we moved from an extremely rural area to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I couldn't stand it at first. I like being away from people. I like being able to hear the birds sing in the morning. I like hearing a stream. I like hearing the creek gurgle. I like being out in nature. I do a lot of fishing. I do a bit of hunting too. I think it's on a personal level. We try to lead a simpler life. We try to, if you can, get out in the country, buy you some land, have you a family. It's completely natural. It's what we were meant to do. And try to, get some livestock, get you, learn to plant a garden, keep you some get into apiculture. That's something I've really been wanting to get into here lately is beekeeping, to get some honey. Try to make yourself as immune as you could to a sort of collapse happening. I don't want more money. I want to be less dependent on money, if you understand what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
So I don't know how we go about fix this on a much larger scale. I think, and it can be disheartening sometimes, I think. You feel I feel insignificant. It's because I know, there's billions of us across the globe. And, it's hard to think what you can do to make a difference in life. But I think that we do have power. We don't have power over much in this world, but we do have power over one thing, and that is ourselves. And if you think about it, that can be some tremendous power. So,
well put.
Yeah, I don't know if we won.
I have one final question.
Okay.
Kind of put you in the spot a bit, so you can take your time with it. So, using the same tentacles, lifting this Christianity thing, placing it on Europeans, and you carefully explained the negative impact that it has done to Europeans worldwide, happening today, even in Europe today, and even in America. If we use that same template and we place it on black people, in your opinion, is the impact negative or positive?
Wow, that's a great question. I
That's why I said
that one.
That's why I said take your time.
That's a great one.
Take your time with it. And like I said, feel free. I don't want you to hold back. And I truly am asking you this question, and I truly do want to hear what you have to say. I find this topic very, very, very interesting. I'm seeing, if I could tap you into my mind, you would see what I'm thinking. But yeah, interesting topic. But yeah, you put that template, right? You rest that on black people. I mean, you've mentioned it. You rest it on natives, and the words that you use, which I'm going to steal from you just in case.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely. Feel free.
Sad, ghostly characters now. Sad, ghostly figures. The once proud nation, pagan or not, heathens or not, they had a full-fledged, vibrant civilization. Christianity came and sat down on them, and now they are, as the Southern Nordic said, and I agree, sad ghost of a people. We put that on black people today, worldwide. Would we have the same effect?
That's as I said, I commend you on an extremely difficult question. First, I'm going to say this. Honestly, I don't think I can answer that question because, after all, I'm not black.
Okay.
I can give you my thoughts on it, nonetheless, and I can't say if I'm right or wrong. I don't know because, as I said, you could answer this much better than I can.
Oh, yes, I can. Oh, yes, I can.
Completely.
But yeah, you're right.
But I will just
no
try
right or
to
wrong.
give you my thoughts on
No
it.
right or wrong answer here. This is your opinion. I'm truly, if we were sitting down drinking a beer right now and we had this conversation one-on-one, I think I would have asked you this already. I just want to hear your opinion. What you got to say? I want to hear that.
I think that, honestly, it can be negative, honestly. I've been reading here lately. I've always been very interested in Malcolm X, honestly.
Okay.
I've always been I think he was a very extremely intelligent man. Extremely. I've been reading, actually last night I was reading a little bit of some of the things that he had wrote and done. And I can agree with a lot of the things that he says. I think he was extremely intelligent. I think he was extremely well-spoken. Honestly, I think he was a much better speaker than Martin Luther King. And I think he was honestly more intelligent in a lot of ways. But I think Christianity is negative because deep down, it seems that if you follow the core tenets of Christianity, it encourages people to be more docile, to be more complacent, to be more accepting. It's said that Jesus said, turn the other cheek, and to pray for your enemies and this and that. And I've been told many times that me saying this is heretical and that it's horrible. But I mean, that's just how I interpret it. Malcolm X, he was involved with the Nation of Islam there for several years. when he rose to fame. And honestly, Islam, and I've heard people that I listen to, European people that I've listened to. Islam is a much more, I guess, it's a dominant faith. It can be violent, you know. I mean, you see how Islam, it came to be in the Middle East. You know, it was a violent takeover. It spread like wildfire across the Middle East and on into Europe, and it spread across North Africa. Myself, I see Christianity as negative. I can't help but see it as that. You know, I don't mean to sound like I'm just horribly anti-Christian. I mean, I'm not. You know, if a person's personal beliefs, if it helps them to be a better person, to lead a good life, who am I to judge? Who am I to say if it works for them? You know, but in a lot of ways, I see Islam in a lot of ways as more fitting for Black people. You know, if they want to, I don't know, if they want to, I would see it as more fitting. As I said earlier, the European people that I've mentioned, they said our race would be much better off if Islam had taken Christianity's place. That's a very interesting train of thought. But I see Christianity, I can see how people say there are positives to it, and I'm more of the opinion that there's negatives to it. But I can understand how there are some positives and how people see it as that, you know. So it's
yeah,
that's a very difficult question.
Hey, and you answered it as truthfully as you could, and I certainly appreciate that. Dave, you know, we've reached the end here, and I do want to reserve the right to have another conversation with you down the road. I definitely
absolutely
do.
I really enjoyed this.
Fantastic.
I didn't know what to expect coming here, but I had a great time. I've really enjoyed it.
Excellent.
And,
you know, most people don't know what to expect, and they come in sometimes a little reluctant, and by the end of the show, they share similar sentiments as you have, and it will always be this way. You know, the show is not about trolling. The show is not about setting people up to have people call in and bash. I'm not interested in that at all. This is information that you know, hopefully enlightens, uplifts, and adds to other information that helps each one of us see what is truth even more clearly. So regardless of where it comes from, it could come from the mouth of a serpent, it could come from the snout of a pig, it could come from the mouth of a saint. It's information, and we're going to take it the same way, put it together, apply it, and work it out. And I certainly appreciate this conversation. The last few shows, it's been, you know, these conversations have been very, very interesting, and I enjoyed it just as much as you did, my man.
Yeah,
Certainly.
I've really enjoyed myself. I was nervous coming in here, but you're an excellent interviewer. You're excellent at what you do.
Thank you very much.
And I appreciate that. And I want to thank you and Atisha for inviting me on here.
All right.
She was extremely helpful in getting me set up.
Excellent.
And I'm gonna have to watch more of your interviews. I watched the interview with I believe her name was Sabrina Scott.
Sabrina, the real life witch. Yeah.
That was very interesting. Certainly. I'm gonna have to watch many more. I'm gonna have to watch more, definitely.
Please do. And in some cases, you guys kind of overlapped with some of the things that you said, dealing with culture. So very, 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 very interesting. Dave, thanks, my man. We'll keep in touch. Absolutely, we'll keep in touch. And it was a fantastic show.
All right.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, there it is. Interesting and enlightening. I had fun. I hope that the information that you received, you could do some thing with it. I got to try to put this together, guys. Right? I gotta, let me take a look here. So we spoke about a lot. We hopped around. What was the topic? It was British Israelism and European culture prior to Christianity. What's the point of that? Well, it means that there was a history prior to Christianity. If you listen carefully to what was said today, there's some questions that you should be asking. Well, Europeans were of a different cloth, let's call it that, prior to Christianity. You read the Second Testament and you see all of the Paul and who he taught, the Gentiles and Europeans, et cetera, et cetera. That's another topic. You read it, you check it out yourself. You see what took place. But prior to that, as Dave said, man, they had a whole culture. They had burial rites, they had gods, deities, they had observances, ways that they marry, spiritual practices, everything. And then this Christianity thing came in, and we got to be careful here. If you listen to what Dave said as well, and I wanted to pull it out, I tried to lay it out without me saying it. He distinguished Christianity separate and apart from the Bible. If you listen to timeline, if you listen to region, if you listen to political ambition, if you listen to spiritual background, you see where it was differentiated. European culture amalgamated and squeezed and gelled together and formed and became this Christianity thing. That Christianity thing, Dave says, is not a positive thing on European culture. In fact, he used the words divorced roots, heavy. Divorced roots, divorced origin, removed. And said that's negative. It just put us in this. And I say us, I'm saying him. It put them in a different area, which was just confusion that seems it doesn't work. Then he also said, the native Indians. That wasn't even our topic, but it came up. He said the native Indians, a sad ghost of who they really were or were before. Christianity has made them docile and shells of their once vibrant culture they had prior. Universalism. I could have asked for a definition, but I didn't think I needed to. Universalism, meaning plug and play, come as you are. You could be from this side of the earth and you have a little bit of that culture in you, which is completely different from that side of the earth with a little bit of that culture. And underneath the umbrella of Christianity, you can merge, plug, and play. But there seems to be a impact to you once this is done. A negative impact, a displacement. The last question I asked Dave was black people. So if this Christianity thing has done this to Europeans, according to his opinion, this Christianity thing has done this to the native Indians, according to your opinion, this Christianity thing placed upon people that look like me, is there a different result? You heard his opinion. If you didn't, watch. Watch. Clickbait. If you didn't, watch. Interesting topic. Very interesting topic. We touched upon the Khazars. Interesting. We touched upon British Israelism and where that came from. Ladies and gents, I want to thank you for joining us here at the Bible Big Mouth Show. This was fun. And we'll be back soon. Like, share, subscribe. Subscribe. Come on now. I mean, you come. Hold on. I think there we go. We got to listen to my daughter.
Live chat do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the Bible Big Mouth or Unapologetic Raw. The objective of this program is to allow you, the caller, and our guest to share their individual thoughts, views, and opinions. Hey, our job is to moderate.
And that we did. Thank you, Dave, the Southern Nordic. Great conversation. Like, subscribe, hit those notifications so that you get notified of what's going on with us. Stay tuned. We ain't gonna stop. We got lots to do and lots to talk about. I think that's it. I think that's about it. All right. Until we see you next time. Peace. Later.